Hey guys, Sam here at NA Studios. Today I want to take a look at something that we're often told not to do, but can sometimes be the only way of doing it. So we're often told to never fix it in the mix, always do it right at the previous stage, and especially never fix it in the master. But what if you have to? What if you have a situation where you've got no choice but to fix something in the master? You haven't got the original tracks, you haven't even got the mix session, you've got to do it. That's what I want to take a look at now, and I'm going to be using iZotope RX9 to accomplish it. Let's jump straight in. So in this instance, I've been remastering an album, and it was something that was recorded in the mid to late 90s, and we didn't have a whole lot in the way of kind of digital manipulation. It was a whole different time, okay? And we weren't able to do half the things we're able to do now. So with the help of iZotope RX9, I've been able to split up these tracks into their relative parts. So I've been able to take the vocal, I've been able to take the guitar, the drums, the bass, and separate them all out so that I can process them all individually and have much more control over the actual recording. So in this instance, I've got a massive session and I've got each of these tracks split up into their counterparts, the parts that make up the track. So I've been able to split them up into bass, other instruments, which usually turns out to be guitars and keyboards, then percussion, and then vocal. And I've done this for all of the tracks, and I've been able to split them up and really get a far more separation out of them. I'm going to go to this track over here, which is Hand That Feeds. Just take a listen to the original as it stands, and then take a listen to the remastered version, and instantly you'll hear a difference as it is. But I just want to dig into the drums a touch. Okay, so aside from being a bit louder, we get far more separation between the guitars. I'm able to dig into those a little bit more EQ-wise without affecting the drums or anything like that. But one thing you'll notice is that the drum sound, it kind of leaves a little to be desired, especially with the snare drum. It's a very natural snare drum sound, and with this kind of industrial metal, I guess you'd call it, we want a bit more punch there. We want a bit more clarity. Just take a listen to the snare drum as it is. It's got a nice snap to it, but not a massive amount of weight. Take a listen. Okay, so let's dig into just the drums, and I've got them separated out here. This is on the percussion track. So let's just zoom in just to these so we can see exactly what's going on. Let's listen to just the drums then. Okay, nice amount of separation there, but I want to get a bit more weight out of that snare. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to duplicate this track, and I'm going to call this one just snare. And then I'm going to drag the file onto that track. So we've now got the duplicate, basically. We've got two lots of drums. On this snare track, I'm going to EQ it so that I've just got the snare on its own. Now, if you want to take a look at how I do this a bit more in depth, I'll pop a video just at the top there, and you can see exactly how I go about doing this in a lot more detail. But for now, we're just going to kind of brush over it, show you generally how I'm going to do it. We're going to do it using EQ, and we're going to do a high pass and a low pass, and just be left with that snare and kind of EQ into the snare so we get loads and loads of that snare resonant frequency, basically. Let's take a listen to it and just hear exactly where that snare lies. So I think it's just around here, around 550, 560. Let's EQ out everything around it. Okay, then let's go down to about 570-ish. Let's boost it with a nice tight Q. Starting to get it now. Let's bring these up. Nice. Okay, so I've got a cycled section here, which is really good for the snare. You can hear it really easily. Let's just take a listen to that and zone in just a little bit further and just hear where we can get just that snare. So you can hear you're getting that kind of ring, the actual note of the resonant frequency of the drum. That's what we want. It sounds awful, but we kind of just want it to sound awful. We just want to get that snare drum and nothing else there. So what I'm going to do for this then is select just that region and press Control B. I'm going to call this snare bip, which is snare bounce in place. So what we've done here is we've just been able to isolate just the snare using EQ. And this is something that if we were at the mastering stage, normally we would have to go in using maybe dynamic EQ, maybe mid-side EQ, whatever it is. There's no way that we can get this amount of manipulation outside of using something like iZotope RX. There are a number of different applications that kind of do this now. I think RX does it really well, and it does it as well as doing a load of other things really well. There's various online kind of platforms that can do it, but I kind of like having that one-stop shop that can do all the things. So let's just get rid of our actual snare track now and just listen to this bounced in place section. Okay, and let's go to an instance of trigger 2. I'm just going to load in a bit more of a modern snare sound, one with a bit more thump to it, a bit more low end, a bit more, well, a bit more of everything really. I like the Slate Digital, the CLA snares, the Crystal Algae snares. These ones are kind of just quick fix. They do a job and they do it quite well. They do it quite quickly. So let's load in number 12. This is the Tama Bell Brass snare. This one sounds pretty good. Now, right off the bat, we're probably going to need to adjust some of these settings, adjust the sensitivity and the detail. So let's just take a listen to that with the detail up a touch and just see how it sounds. Okay, I'm missing a couple there. Let's just bring that down slightly. And just so we get just the kind of really hard hits, let's bring the lower range up slightly, velocity up, and let's make it not quite so dynamic. There's some really handy controls here. We can make it so that it doesn't trigger any samples that are below, in this case, 71. And the velocity, it's not going to make it as velocity sensitive, so it's going to not worry too much about being really realistic, because we've already got the original snare below it, so we don't need to worry too much about that. We just want the kind of thump of it coming through. Let's take a listen to that. Nice. Excellent. So what I'd like to do then is just get rid of that snare completely first off, and then bring it in. So I'm going to take mute off and just bring that snare fader up until we start to hear some of that low end thump coming through that we were missing before. Loads better. Now we can do this with any instrument we want. We can do this with the kick drum, or we could even dig into the toms. That might be a little bit more difficult to actually get those tom fills there, but we could potentially do it. What we might like to do though is just go into the drums and just compress the drums with the sidechain of the trigger track. So we're only going to compress that drum track when that snare sounds, because we didn't particularly like the sound of the original snare. It's nice to have it in there a small amount, but it'd be good to be able to just duck it and just get rid of it. That's exactly what we're going to do. So let's go to our dynamic section. Let's go to compressor. Let's go to something. Let's just leave it on the blue one for the minute. The Platinum Digital, that's as good as any. And we're going to set the sidechain to snare BIP. Now it's going to take me ages to find this because there's absolutely millions of tracks here. It's the one down the bottom, the last one created. So we've got the sidechain set as Audio 66, which is that snare bounce in place, which we just created. So it's going to compress the drums just when that snare hits. Let's take a look at the meters and see how it's doing that. Yeah, we can see here. I'm going to take the release auto off because I want it to just jump straight back in. I just wanted to get rid of that initial transient of that original snare. So the release is going to be very, very fast, and the attack is going to be pretty fast as well. Let's take a listen without this compressor. Yeah, so we're managing to get rid of a lot of the initial kind of ping of that snare. There's a somewhat annoying kind of rattle there as well, that kind of open snare sound, which I think we're managing to get rid of with that compressor. I've also got the auto gain off. By default, I save that as a default with the auto gain off because I just find it frustrating how it does it for me. If I want to bring it up to Unity or more to Unity, I want to do that for myself. So let's take a listen to this now with the original snare more or less taken out using that compressor, and this is with our sample replace snare, and see how it sounds. In fact, let's go before anything and then take a listen with the new snare. Cool. It's a bit of a dirty way of doing it, but the thing is, sometimes you get given a job where you have no choice but to do anything you can to make it sound right. Often in mastering in particular, you'll get told you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't add more than 2 dB of high end, you can't add more than 3 dB of compression, else you're breaking the rules of some mastering god somewhere. Often though, you just have to do what needs to be done. Nobody's going to listen to that and say, they've used iZotope RX, music rebalance, and then they've replaced the snare. They're just going to say, the snare sounds all right, doesn't it? If they listen to the original one, or maybe if they listen to it with these so-called mastering rules in place, it wouldn't sound as good. I know that they're kind of there for a reason often, but in this kind of instance where you have to get really extreme, anything goes, I think. And for this kind of thing where we just want to really dig in and get that snare replaced and get a better sound, we've had to go through a lot of stages to get there. We've had to take it all into RX, separate all the instruments and then replace the snare. But the outcome is totally worth it. And I think in all audio, no matter what the path is that you use to get to that end point, it's going to be worth it if the sound is right in the end. So I hope it's been useful for you. This whole fix it in the mix, fix it in the master, it is kind of a good thing to stand by, but sometimes you just have to do it. You just have to do what's needed. Make sure you check out the rest of the channel, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.